Alright everyone, welcome back to the RazorwireReviews Podcast number 5. This is the second time I'm recording this. I recorded it yesterday, listened to it back, and it was an absolute complete and utter cluster, you know what. So I'm doing it all over again. I've got notes in front of me on the screen, so I'm going to do this properly this time. It is the 18th of February 2014. It is 5 minutes to 5 PM. That's Norwegian time. And it is officially 6 weeks since I started trying to lose some weight. My DDP yoga, eating a bit healthier, not having so much crap, especially in the weekdays. Been cheating a little on Saturday, sometimes a bit on Friday, but generally keeping a lot healthier than I've usually been. And over 6 weeks, I've lost exactly 5 kilos, which is around 11 pounds and about 0.7 stone, something like that. So it's good. It could be better, but I'm happy with what I've done so far. Last Friday was Valentine's Day. Everyone was celebrating Valentine's Day, and me and Connie don't really like to kind of acknowledge it as this kind of thing where we have to buy each other things. Especially since I've got no money right now. But generally we don't. We don't get each other like roses, or I don't get her roses, or we don't get cards. We don't really fully buy into the Valentine's Day bullshit. It is really, everyone says it. It's just the whole card company invented holiday that wasn't even a holiday. It's just a day that they've kind of set aside to make more money than usual, and it works, but people buy into it. And that being said, I still do like the idea of setting aside a day to kind of make things a little bit more special, but still we don't go overboard. We just spent the night sat at home, we didn't go out or anything, but we just had some pizza, some frozen pizza, and we watched WrestleMania like I think every other couple in the world was doing at that very night. No, we watched WrestleMania, and we actually watched a film as well. We watched Sleepless in Seattle, which I'll be talking about in the movie segment of the podcast. And it wasn't really a conscious decision to watch a kind of romantic movie. It just popped up. Me and Connie, lately we're having a lot of trouble kind of deciding what movies to watch. There's so many options we have. I have so many Blu-rays here that I've brought over in CD cases. I have, she has Netflix, and there's so many different ways we can watch movies, and so many movies available to us that sometimes it becomes overwhelming. We don't know what to watch, and we can't decide on anything. Both of us, we don't really beat around the bush. If we don't want to watch something, we'll say, I don't want to watch that right now, and then we just kind of get into a bit of a standoff. But we eventually settled on Sleepless in Seattle. I hadn't seen it all the way through before. I'd seen the beginning plenty of times, seen the end a few times, so we decided to watch that, and I'll talk about that in the movie segment, as I've already mentioned. So yeah, I also made her a kind of, I guess what you would call, 20 years ago, a mixtape. But really it was just kind of a mix file, an MP3 file about 40 minutes long of me kind of talking like this, like I am to you right now in a podcast format. Kind of being a little stupid, doing some imitations and, just talking about stuff. And then also putting music in there, some music tracks I know that Connie would like. Some music tracks I know that make her laugh. There's some audio in there from like a stupid YouTube video that we found funny. Our whole day-to-day life is based around like in-jokes and kind of funny YouTube videos that we quote to each other on a daily basis. So I just put stuff like that in there, and a little bit of lovey-dovey stuff in there, but mainly just a bit of a laugh. And so I put that on her phone for her, so she could listen to it on her bus ride to work that morning, and she really liked it. So that's cool, and it doesn't cost anything. So yeah, that was Valentine's Day. Nothing to write home about, but I'm here talking about it, I guess. The USA trip is a month away now. Still seems mental that it's actually happening, and still seems surreal, particularly as it pertains to WrestleMania. I'm not going to believe that I'm going to be at a WrestleMania until I walk into that building, even though by that point I've already been in New Orleans for 48 hours. I would already have been to the Hall of Fame ceremony. I will have already been around wrestling fans for 2 days straight, and it still won't sink in until I'm in that arena and I see whatever kind of big stage setup they have. And I don't know, maybe I won't even believe it until I've left and the show's over. It's just one of those lifelong dreams to go to a WrestleMania, and I just can't believe it's happening. When I was in high school, I made a pact with a few of my friends, and I didn't have many friends in high school, but the few friends I did have who were into wrestling, I made a pact with them that we were going to go to WrestleMania 20 together, because at that point it seemed like WrestleMania 20 was so far in the future that by that point we'd be like 30 and grown up with kids and wives and all that kind of thing. But of course, by the time WrestleMania 20 actually happened, I was still, I was actually leaving high school that the month, not that month, a few months after WrestleMania 20, I left high school. I'd actually moved from England to Wales, so I kind of left that high school as I was saying to those people we should meet up and go to WrestleMania 20. It just seemed like such a far away thing, and now of course we got 30 just around the corner, and it's crazy and makes you feel a little bit old, even though I'm not old at all. But there you go. Another thing I want to talk about very quickly, and I want to cram in as much as possible. We'll stretch it out a little further. That's what she said. I want to talk about a book that I wrote in 2010. It was part of something called the National Novel Writing Month, which takes place every November. You can go to the website. I think it's NANOWRIMO.com. It kind of abbreviates the whole thing, National Novel Writing Month. Every November, you can sign up to the website. It's all free, and you can basically just chart your progress of writing a 50,000 word novel in the space of the month of November. It can be longer than 50,000 words, but 50,000 words is kind of like the base minimum of like a novella or a novel, of that kind of length. And so I decided to go for it in 2010, and I was in a very Pink Floyd kind of phase at that time, and I go through phases of music I listen to and films I watch and wrestling that I watch and things, but really I was into Pink Floyd a lot, and so I wrote a book kind of based around Pink Floyd about a guy who in the 70s had a bad breakup, went through a little bit of a bout of depression, and kind of found the music of Pink Floyd, and that kind of made his depression a little worse, but then kind of made the hope in his life a bit more prominent. He found a friend and someone who liked the music, and they kind of bonded over the music, and how he tried to become a musician didn't really pan out for him, and eventually he went through another kind of tragic event, a couple of tragic events, and he meets this girl, and he's in no way ready to kind of get into a relationship, but even though he really likes her and she really likes him, so they just decide to be friends, and that she likes Pink Floyd too, and kind of they bond over that, and it's similar to a previous relationship he's had with a friend, and so they actually decide to go to a Pink Floyd concert, and they fly over to America to see one, and there's a couple of twists and turns, and eventually it ends up with them at a concert that Pink Floyd did in July 1977 in Montreal. And I actually had a recording, a bootleg recording of that concert, and so I basically took that 2.5 hour recording, religiously listened to it, and kind of novelized it in a way that I thought was, I really wanted to be as accurate as possible, down to, a guy in the crowd says this, and actually happened. There was someone in that crowd who shouted this random thing out, and it's in the book, For me, reading it back now, I don't love it. There's a few bits in it where I just think, God, that is really good writing. Not to blow my own horn, but I think that's really good writing. There's a lot of it where I think that's really not good. That's almost cringeworthy, and I think, what was I thinking? And it's obviously a reflection of how you are at that time. I think a lot of writing and creativeness and creative outputs are kind of autobiographical by nature at times, but I know that there's just some parts I wish I could change, and I haven't kind of done the second draft of it, so I'd like to go in and do the second draft, but the issue is, there's a point in the book where the characters actually meet and interact with members of the band, and of course that's where you get into this dangerous kind of area where you can't really publish a book like that, where you're talking about someone who's real and putting them in a situation that didn't happen, especially when certain things are going on, and so it's never a book I could release, which is kind of unfortunate because I really put a lot of work into it, but it'd be nice to kind of just have it finished and done in a form that I like and enjoy, and I don't like the ending. I got too soft with the ending. I cared about my own characters too much, and I gave them too happy of an ending, so I want to go back and change that. But yeah, that's my book. It's called In the Flesh, and I'm just proud that after, I don't know, maybe almost 20 years of wanting to write a full book, I actually did it, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write books. I loved reading. I loved stories, creating stories, listening to stories, reading stories, and I wanted to make my own stories, and I'd always tried to write a book. I've probably got about 60 different kind of books that I've started writing. A lot of them are just variations of the same story, but this was the first one I just kind of went completely blank in and just started from scratch and actually finished it in about 25 days. So it was an intensive period, but a really enjoyable one. And I hope to kind of maybe write again sometime. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't know why I wanted to talk about that. It was just something I wanted to kind of get my thoughts down on at this point in time. Now we're going to go to the question segment. Yes, I threw out the gauntlet, the challenge, both on this podcast and on my Twitter page, for people to send me in questions. I got a lot of Twitter questions, not a lot of them, but a few of them. So thank you to the people who did send in questions. What I'm going to do is answer a few of them now, and a few of them in the wrestling segment at the end of this podcast. If you haven't listened to this before, it generally goes, I talk about my personal stuff, then I go into movies, and then wrestling at the end. So if you're not about the wrestling, you can just stop listening at that point. The wrestling-related questions will be at the end of the podcast. So first of all, I had a YouTube comment. I'll also accept those for questions on the first post, the first YouTube post I did of podcast number 3 from WWE Freak 101. He asked me, why did you call yourself RazorwireReviews? I don't really call myself RazorwireReviews. It's just the name of my channel, I really just say it's me, Luke. I don't really kind of say. I mean, I used to when I first started the channel, when I wasn't really sure the direction I was going in. But really, I'm just Luke. RazorwireReviews is kind of the banner of my YouTube channel and series and all that kind of stuff. The name it's a long story. I don't even know whether it's worth getting into. When I used to wrestle, I wrestled under the name of Sandog, which was a reference to an obscure Star Wars reference, and it was just a really stupid name. I came up with it on the spot because I needed a name, and it stuck, and it just stuck for years, and it got to the point where it was just a normal thing. If you say something stupid for long enough, it just becomes quite normal, and then you forget how stupid it is unless you kind of look at it and analyze it and say it a few times. And so Sandog was my wrestling name. And in 2009, I changed it up a bit, and I started wrestling under the name of Razorwire Ryan. My last name is Ryan, so it fit. But the reason was because I started getting comments from people saying that I was ripping off a certain wrestler, which wasn't true. And his name was Voodoo. That was his wrestling name, Backyard Wrestling. He was kind of almost this mythical backyard wrestler everyone loved. He could do no wrong, and he was amazing. But to kind of even try and emulate anything he did was kind of seen as kind of like, oh, you can't do that, and people were like, oh, you're trying to be like him. And he once wrestled a couple of times as Barbed Wire Barnes. His last name is Barnes, so it fits. So I decided I was going to do a play on that and wrestle as Razorwire Ryan, just to piss people off and get people booing and stuff when I was wrestling. And it was just a little bit of a fun thing that I kind of did for a few matches, maybe about 6 or 7 matches, and yeah, that's it really. So Razorwire Ryan became kind of a nickname I'd use, just for various websites I signed up to, or I got Xbox Live, I got an Xbox 360 in 2010, so I just used the name Razorwire Ryan, and I think I got my PS3 gamer tag is the same. If you want to add me on that, that's cool. Razorwire Ryan, Twitter, and then when I came to want to do a YouTube channel was when I was already doing a WordPress blog, which I've restarted now, and I'm posting all these podcasts on there. If you're not listening to it on that website, you can download all the podcasts from the WordPress page, and you can also read reviews I've written on movies and wrestling, so I'm keeping up to date with that, so please keep checking back to RazorwireReviews.wordpress.com. Oh god, I'm getting out of breath. And yes, so I started up a blog where I was writing about wrestling, and then I thought I want to do some videos, so I started the YouTube channel and I called it Razorwire Reviews, and that was kind of, again, when I made the WordPress page I was like, what can I call it? Something reviews. I started off thinking of doing it as Bog Standard Reviews, which is kind of a Carl Pilkington reference, but well, not a reference, but just something funny that he said. And I actually did a few videos under the name of Bog Standard Reviews, but I didn't like it. It didn't have any longevity to me, so I thought Razorwire Reviews. I was like, yeah, let's go with that, whatever. Again, it's stuck, and it's just one of those things. It's not great, but it just stuck, and so that's what I use now on YouTube. And of course, my YouTube channel started out as a wrestling channel, evolved into me talking about movies, and I had more fun doing that. I preferred the community of people who were making videos about movies as opposed to people who are making videos about wrestling. Even though I still like people who make videos about wrestling, but I feel like, well, I won't even get into it, but I just prefer the movie community more. And so I got more into that, and now I'm heavily into the movie side of it, and I'm loving that, so that's really the evolution of my channel. And why I called myself Razorwire Reviews. So there's your very long answer, WWE Freak 101. I hope it was satisfactory. So moving over to Twitter now. I have a question from Marcus Smith, at Marcus Myth. He asks, what's your favourite movie that would be described as being aimed towards the female audience? I've thought about this a bit, because I actually did the podcast yesterday, as I said. So I'm just going to be more succinct this time, to save some time. There are 3 movies I think that I love that are kind of, you could say, are kind of aimed towards women. The first one would be Love Actually. I love that movie. I just think it's a real joy. You know, it's not like a perfect movie or anything, but I just think it's so enjoyable. There's some great kind of romance stories in there. I love the anthology feel of it, even though it's not really an anthology feel, but kind of the ensemble feel of it. I love almost all the storylines running through it. I think there's some great acting in it, and just a really nice, warm, fun movie. Notting Hill is another one I love. Again, very cliche, but you know, I really like it. It's just a great movie. And then movies like You Got Mail and Sleepless in Seattle. You've Got Mail, I just love it. I just think Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan's chemistry is just fantastic, and I just love that film so much. And yeah, I'm a sucker for a good romantic comedy if it works, and you know, I'm quite a romantic person anyway, so even if it is kind of a good movie but kind of stretches things a little, I'll still enjoy it if it doesn't take it too far. Like Serendipity, another movie which is about two people who meet in New York and they spend a night together, and you know, they're both with someone and they don't do anything, but there's a spark there, and it's Kate Beckinsale, John Cusack, and they decide to leave it up to fate. So she writes her number on a dollar bill, and she gives it to this vendor, and he gives it to someone else, and then the bill goes away, and then I think he writes his name, or he writes his name. He writes his name on the dollar bill. She gives the dollar bill away, reasoning that if it's meant to be, she'll get the dollar bill back at some point, you know, like it's meant to be. And she writes her name and address in a book and hands it into a used bookstore, so that he's got to try and find it in New York and all the many different used bookstores. Years go by, they're both with people, and fate keeps bringing them together, and it's kind of a will they finally meet each other again, and they both become kind of obsessed with each other, even though they haven't seen each other in years. And it's very kind of idealistic, but I absolutely love it. It's a great movie. So there you go, Marcus. Marcus actually runs a podcast called They Talk Movies, Don't They, on the Loudy Speak Network. I'll leave a link to that in the WordPress page for this podcast, and also down below in the YouTube link if you're watching that or listening to this on YouTube. Go check out They Talk Movies, Don't They podcast. It's about an hour long, sometimes a bit longer. They have a guest on. It's Marcus Smith hosting with Leo Jukes. Great guys. I went on there once myself, even though I was feeling a bit ill, but they just kind of talk about movies and stuff. I mean, it is solely about movies, really, and really enjoyable, really funny, really kind of low-key, lo-fi kind of... They don't try too hard, which I don't want to discredit them, but it's like a really relaxed kind of fun kind of vibe that goes on in that podcast, so I definitely recommend checking it out. Next up, we have a question from Jason Pritchard at JASPRILFC07. Don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce that. I don't know if this tweet was for me generally or for the podcast, so I'm going to reply to him anyway, just in case he's not listening to this. But he asked me, "Are you doing a 24-hour movie marathon this year? I really enjoyed last year's YouTube video. Thanks." Thank you. I really enjoyed making last year's epic, massive feature-length 24-hour movie marathon video, but I won't be doing one as big this year, I don't think, but I will be doing the 24-hour movie marathon this year in April sometime, so you can look forward to that, but don't expect anything anywhere near as involved or as huge as that video was last year. I'm very happy with how that panned out, but we'll see where it goes. Next up, we have a question from Jonas Olsen. Am I pronouncing that right? Gave it a shot. At Plox2. His question is, if you had to choose between wrestling and movies, what would it be? That's a real easy one. It sounds like it'd be a tough one for me because I do love both of them so much, but it would be movies. It was my first kind of love my first love was stories and books and writing, but movies was my first real, I want to do this, kind of thing, and I absolutely just love movies so much. Wrestling I love as well. I love the art form that wrestling is. I love the immediacy of it. I love the athleticism that's involved. I love the showmanship, the entertainment value. But for me, with wrestling, the ratio of enjoyment and not enjoying it is a lot kind of higher in the favor of not enjoying it than it is with movies. I find movies a lot more of a rewarding experience than wrestling, because wrestling is, again, so immediate and so fast, and so it's just, there's so much of it that there's a much higher kind of there's a higher probability of you being disappointed in wrestling because there's so much of it, and because it's so on the fly and so unpredictable. But that is also one of the things I love about it. But for me, if I had to choose, it would be movies all the way. But luckily, we're in a world where I don't have to choose between the two. Excuse me again. But if I did have to choose, it would be movies. They're just far more enjoyable and rewarding, generally, for me, than wrestling is. So, thanks for the question. And I think that's it for this portion of the questions segment. I have a question from Jay Hopkinson and from Chris Vint, which I will be answering at the end of the podcast because they're solely wrestling related questions. So we'll get into that at the end of the podcast, and we're now going to go into the movie section.
It's time to talk movies.
Okay, it is time to talk movies, and a few movies I've watched over the past week. I've actually only watched one real movie, which is mental for me. Ever since I stopped doing the Friday film review series on YouTube, I just seem to have dropped out from doing, watching as many movies, I guess. One of them I watched was Metallica Through the Never, which is a concept movie. You can check out my full thoughts on that on the WordPress page, RazorwireReviews.wordpress.com, just to throw in another plug there. I did a full written review for that, so you can check out my full thoughts on that. But I really enjoyed it. I love Metallica. It was a great concert film. I love the kind of the segments with Dane DeHaan, just really visual and interesting and exciting. But the stage show itself takes literally center stage. Metallica's kind of almost retrospective kind of massive show, just really as a Metallica fan was really pleasing. Just they had lots of props that kind of related to like the albums that they've done. Like they had the crosses from Master of Puppets kind of raising up from the stage. They had this massive, literally huge kind of electric chair lowering from the ceiling from the Ride the Lightning album. They had huge coffins lowering from the ceiling that related to Death Magnetic. It's just some amazing set pieces. Probably the best one was the statue from And Justice for All. This huge statue that's erected as they're playing the song And Justice for All, and it's just like, I don't know, maybe a 50-foot statue, and then it just, crumbles to the ground. It's just an incredible piece of showmanship that they played throughout all these amazing kind of set pieces, and I thought the playing was great as well. And as a film, it looked fantastic. I thought it was great. I think it was a little bit more catered towards the 3D experience because I watched it in 2D, and I feel like there's a bit of blurring at times. It probably would have been better in the 3D format, but there you go. Sleepless in Seattle, let's talk about that. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I'd seen the beginning before, seen the end before, but there's about 20 minutes in the middle I hadn't seen before, which didn't really add that much, to be honest with you, but it is what it is, and I really enjoyed it, and it's a great romantic movie. It's really kind of weird because if you look at it through kind of the eyes of someone from the 2014, I don't know if this movie would fly now because it's kind of creepy. It really is kind of creepy. Meg Ryan, who plays Annie, who kind of listens to a call that Tom Hanks' character makes on the radio about losing his wife and dealing with that with his son and everything, and she kind of falls in love with him a little bit, even though she's with a guy called Walter, played by Bill Pullman, who's really probably the weakest part of the film. Even though I enjoy his performance, I'm a big fan of Bill Pullman in general, actually, but his Walter character is a bit of a caricature, really. And my phone's ringing, so I'm gonna have to pause this, but I'll get back to it in a second. Alright, so as I was saying, and I'm not going to try and edit that to make it seem any smoother, but yeah, Walter's character seems like a bit of a caricature. It's kind of like, he's ill, he's got sinus problems, he's allergic to everything, and it's kind of funny, but it's probably the weakest character, I think, or the weakest part of the script. But yeah, it's just kind of creepy because Annie just has this obsession with Tom Hanks to the point where she kind of goes into this computer system and finds out where he lives and flies across America to kind of stalk him and watch him play with his son and go back home. It's really kind of, if it was a man in that role, people would not be happy with it. It would cause a bit of a stir, I think, because it would be creepy, a man stalking a woman. When it's a woman stalking a man, it's cute, it's adorable, Quite interesting, I thought, just thinking about it from that perspective. And at the same time, it almost feels like it's a love affair between Annie and Tom Hanks' son Jonah, because he's the one who's reading her letters and saying, "Dad, you got to meet this girl." But it all works out in the end, and for a movie where your two main characters who have this love story don't ever meet until the end of the movie. Well, they don't meet, but they see each other, and I don't want to. Well, I've spoiled it now, but it's a classic movie. Everyone talks about it, but I feel like it's very hard to make a movie where you got to anchor it between two characters who've never met before, and you got to believe in the fact that they will have chemistry and that they will love each other at the end. But they pulled it off, but because Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks are just that good, or they were at this point anyway. I thought this came out in like the late 80s. I really did, especially looking at Meg Ryan's haircut. But it was actually 1993, which is only a few years before You've Got Mail. I always thought that those two films were like 10 years apart, and it certainly seems like it when you watch them both. But so it only came out in 1993. And speaking of Tom Hanks, we're going to move right on with something I'm so excited about. Finally, we get the news, the Blu-ray news, and I'm going to try and talk about some more Blu-ray news actually on this podcast. But on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, I can't wait, Arrow Video are finally going to announce the details, or at least the release date, of The Burbs on Blu-ray. Holy shit! I'm so excited for this. I just almost exploded with joy when I heard at the end of 2013 that they were going to be releasing The Burbs in 2014 on Blu-ray. I mean, holy shit. This is a movie I absolutely adore. One of Tom Hanks' best movies. It's just so funny, and I have quite a personal connection to it as well. It will always be one of my favourite films. And, I hate the fact that the DVD has no extras, but it's coming out on Blu-ray, which is great. Just have it in high definition, but it's coming out in Arrow Video. I mean, Arrow Video, they just push the boat out with every release they do. Usually their releases are, kind of horror movies, kind of B movies, kind of exploitation movies, that kind of thing. And this is definitely kind of a cult movie, but I really hope they put in as much effort as they do with the other releases, because they usually have like a really nice presentation where that you have like some cool original artwork. Sometimes they'll even have reversible artwork, where there's like a alternate artwork on the other side of the sleeve. They kind of actually create extras especially for the set. They usually have a booklet. Hopefully we'll get something like that. I'm really excited, and I'll probably talk about it in the next podcast when we hear some more details. But just anything on this film would be great, especially like a commentary from the director or something. That would be brilliant. But I'm so excited about The Burbs, and the news tomorrow. I'll be waiting patiently to see what Arrow Video has to say about the long-awaited release of The Burbs on Blu-ray. And finally, to round up the movie talk, I wanted to talk to you about my top 50 films of 2013. I'm not going to tell you them because it's going to be a YouTube video series. Well, not series, but it kind of is, I guess. Basically, there's going to be quite a few videos. There's going to be my top 20 films of 2013 video, which is kind of for people who just want to hear my top 20. For people who want to hear even more, there'll be an alternate cut of that where it'll be a top 50 of 2013. So there'll be those two videos. And then I'm going to talk about the 11 films that I gave 10 out of 10 in 2013. I'll be doing a video for each one of them, a dedicated review going a bit more in depth about those movies. And there's 11 of them, so yeah. And also, finally, there'll be one video I'll be releasing at the end of it all, which won't be going on YouTube because I won't be able to get away with it. It's called 2013 in Cinema. It's about an 8-minute music video that kind of features clips from most of the films that came out in 2013 that I really enjoyed. And it has, just some great moments, and it's one of the best things I've ever edited, I think. I've almost finished it. I'm really happy with it. I've spent a lot of time on it. I've been working on it since December. I spent about 16 hours on a 3-second shot in that video. I put a lot of time into it, so I'm looking forward to releasing that. It'll probably be released on Vimeo or some other kind of video site, and I'll be linking it, all over my various kind of social media outlets on Twitter or Facebook, that kind of thing. So you'll know about it, but yeah, I'm looking forward to releasing that video. And what I'm going to do is actually give you a little preview of sorts of the top 50, and I'm going to tell you what my notable mentions are. There are 50 films that I class as my top 50 films of the year. There were also 25 films that could have easily gone on that list that I really enjoyed but just didn't quite make the top 50, and I didn't want to do a top 75. 50 is a round number, that's a good one to do. So here we go. My top 25 notable mentions of 2013. Byzantium, Stand Up Guys, Captain Phillips, Blue Jasmine, Saving Mr. Banks, Despicable Me 2, The Croods, Star Trek Into Darkness, Evil Dead, The Conjuring, Now You See Me, Upstream Color, First Love, Rewind This, Don John, Side Effects, Gimme the Loot, Metallica Through the Never, All Is Bright, This Is the End, This Is the End, Fast 6, Iron Man 3, Kick-Ass 2, Epic, and The Great Gatsby. So yeah, there's my top 25 notable mentions of the year, and look out on YouTube for my YouTube channel for the actual top 50 video itself and the top 20 video if the top 50 video is too much for you. So that's it for the movie stuff. If you're leaving the podcast now, thank you for listening, and make sure you tune in next time. And now we're going to go straight into the wrestling.
It's time to talk wrestling.
It is time to talk wrestling. This past week I watched the Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior documentary that WWE released in 2005, and wow, they bury him in that. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the Warrior, but after watching kind of the past WrestleManias and seeing some of his work a bit more closely, I decided to watch this documentary, and it really is almost the ultimate burial of the Ultimate Warrior, where a lot of people interviewed just really didn't like him. Ted DiBiase in particular, Gene Okerlund. The most prominent kind of hater of Ultimate Warrior was Bobby Heenan, who just completely just blackballs this guy completely consistently throughout. It's incredible to watch. It is a really interesting piece of wrestling history in which, you know, Warrior doesn't have a chance to defend himself. Well, he did. Apparently he declined the invite to be interviewed. Hulk Hogan talks about him. Vince talks about him. And it's a very enjoyable watch, actually, because you get to see his history and kind of what he kind of brought to the table and a bit more about his life and career. But ultimately it is kind of a bit of a burial. But they are coming out with a new DVD this year that will probably kind of change their tune a little bit now that they're on better terms with the Ultimate Warrior. But it does seem like, to be honest, it was a self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior, and he was too self-important and didn't really get the business like other people have. I definitely agree with that, but it is really a burial. Next up, CM Punk has apparently been released from his contract with the WWE. His contract was supposed to be up in July of this year. There were reports over the weekend that he actually requested a release and was granted that on Friday. Now it's come out that WWE has actually said to some website that that's not the case. He has not been granted a release from his contract. It's the first time WWE have kind of actually mentioned, the fact that the Punk is gone, really. So it's interesting. We're going to see where it kind of goes, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we never see CM Punk in the WWE again, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him turn up in a few weeks' time on Raw. It's one of those things where I just have no idea where it's going, but I think like CM Punk is a very selfish person. I love him, I think he's great, but I think he's a very selfish person, so he's going to do what's right for him, not what's right for the fans, and you can't really fault him for that. He's got to do what he's got to do. Now, the Twitter wrestling questions, I just want to get into that. The one that I will answer is from Jay Hopkinson. You can follow him at J_3628, and he asked me what's my favourite Undertaker WrestleMania match. That one is a no-brainer. It will be The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 25. I think I prefer the 26 match, but you can't really beat the 25 match. It is the best one, I think. It's just so unpredictable, or it was unpredictable at the time. I mean, it's such a great match anyway, but the extra added drama of Undertaker doing that suicide dive and falling right on his head, nearly breaking his neck, it added so much kind of accidental drama to the match. I mean, I thought he was done. I thought he'd really hurt himself bad. Not that he'd broken his neck, but maybe had really hurt his back or his neck and wouldn't be able to continue. And when Shawn went into the ring for the count-out victory, I thought they were going to end it there. When Undertaker rolled back in the ring, I was like, oh my god, what are they going to do? He manages to get to his feet. He chokeslams Shawn. I think they're just going to end it there so they can get him to the back and assess the damage. Shawn kicks out, and it's just like, holy shit, what's going on? And then Taker gets up on his feet, and he's doing an elbow drop off the top rope, and it's just like, this is mental. That was just the most incredible live experience watching that match on pay-per-view with my mates. It was just awesome. And at the very end of the match, when Shawn kicks out the tombstone, and the look on Taker's face was just such a phenomenal piece of drama. Everyone laughed at it, but I just got goosebumps. It was brilliant. And then Shawn goes up to the corner, and instantly I knew what they were doing, and I was like, oh my god. And I stood on my feet. I actually stood on my feet and put my hand over my mouth, and I said, please work, please work, please work, because I knew that Shawn was going to try a moonsault, and I knew that they were going to try and have it where Undertaker would reverse the moonsault into the tombstone. He did it. He jumped, he backflipped, He landed Undertaker perfectly for the tombstone, and it was just picture perfect. It was lightning in a bottle. It was just an incredible match, and just it's basically what sports entertainment is all about. And to have two guys like Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker who have had their best career moments at WrestleMania face off against each other. I mean, I don't think people were expecting it to be that good. They were expecting a good match, but it really wasn't kind of billed as like, oh, this is going to be the best match on the show. But it really, really was. And by the time they did a rematch next year, it was billed as the top match. It was the main event, and you know, we all know how that panned out. But it was just, how many more words can I throw at this match to kind of describe how much I love it? But yeah, it's brilliant. And the fact that they were both in their 40s, you know, and at the end of their careers was also another just amazing thing. And they put on one of the best matches of either of their careers, you know, in the twilight of their own careers. So that's my favorite Undertaker WrestleMania match. And finally, before I end this podcast, actually no, there's one more thing I want to talk about in terms of wrestling, but Chris Vinto316 at Vinto316, he asked me, if WrestleMania 30 could be your own, what would you do card wise? So how would I book WrestleMania 30 if it was my choice to make? Now this is a loaded question, it's a great question, but I'm going to do a full podcast answering this question. I'm going to give you a few different variations of what I would do for WrestleMania 30. So look out for the next podcast. It will be a special where I'm talking about my booking of WrestleMania 30. So thanks for the question, Chris. I'll probably be meeting Chris actually at WrestleMania in about a month or so time, because he'll be there too, I think, and so it'll be good to meet up with some of them guys, and I'm sure we'll bump into each other in the hotel or something like that. So that's going to be awesome. But yeah, I'll answer that question in a dedicated podcast. And before I finish out, I just want to say I watched Raw from last night, and holy shit, Cesaro versus John Cena was absolutely incredible. What a great match. I mean, Cesaro did what no one's ever been able to do so far, and that's reverse the attitude adjustment by flipping onto their feet. Punk tried to do it at Money in the Bank, and he fell straight on his ass. I don't know why people rate that match as a 5-star match when there was it wasn't a bad botch, but you know, when Punk tried to do something and just fell completely on his ass, I just thought that took away a slight kind of point from the match. But Daniel Bryan tried to do it at SummerSlam. I haven't seen anyone do it. Maybe they have, but Cesaro, even considering his size, just did it perfectly. It was amazing. And then Cena with that really unique setup into the FU and or attitude adjustment, and Cesaro doing that deadweight superplex off the second rope on Cena was just incredible match. I really hope that the future is going to be bright for Cesaro, because he really deserves it. He's a fantastic wrestler, and yeah, I think the future really is bright with people like Daniel Bryan, Cesaro, and Roman Reigns, and people, Dolph Ziggler, you know, in the WWE. Let's just hope that they get used in the way that they deserve. So that's all I'm going to talk about right now. Thank you for listening, if you listened this far, and if you're, you know, obviously if you listen this far, you're interested in the wrestling stuff, so be sure to check back for the next podcast where I'll be talking about my thoughts on the WrestleMania 30 card and how I would book it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.